Such a good question. I actually, they're not just relatable. I actually think they're compounding at the moment. Like if you think of, I always like to really sort of focus on the environment we're in at the moment to start with. But for me, you've kind of got these like three massive drivers that in my mind are kind of creating a lot of the angst and the uncertainty around compensation and kind of leading it to be something that needs a little bit more focus from companies. So the first and foremost is that in the last couple of years, we've seen a massive drive legislatively around pay transparency. So companies increasingly are expected to share the salary associated with a role, either just to candidates or to their employees as well. And I think what what a lot of companies came to learn through that process is that sharing the number is really only part of the equation. So there's the number, and then there's everything that goes into it. Why, how do we land on that number? What goes into it? What's it made up from? How did we, what's the reasoning and the justification behind it? That like challenge has continued to exist for a lot of organizations. And I think closely related to that is that you mentioned younger generations, like Gen Z are about to become about 25% of the workforce in the next couple of years. They're definitely not afraid to ask around pay. There's really no taboo when it comes to having that discussion. And I think increasingly we're seeing them sort of have this view that or rather that they don't see employment for life anymore. They really don't see, companies as being that place they go to forever. They retire at 65 and then they have their holidays and things like that. So it's a very, very different relationship. And I think that's more increasingly putting the emphasis on that entire employee value proposition. Comp is just one part in the chain. And how can we optimize that to be an optimizer and to be a value add rather than a detractor or just kind of a baseline experience. The last one I'd say, obviously very relevant to this, is that the last few years have seen a huge, huge change in the tech that is available for companies to handle compensation. Smaller and smaller companies are getting access to greater and greater tools, and it's making, or I guess it's putting the power in their hands to be more competitive and really turn comp from a sort of underwhelming transactional experience into much more of that value driver. And so I think that again is kind of creating this pressure within the industry for people to be able to really get this right and kind of move out of spreadsheets, move out of it being something that we just focus on getting done, to actually focus on it being a real value add. How can we optimize the employee experience? Which is something I always really like to frame this from the perspective of. I mean, some of the things that I think about with companies that are struggling in this space, one of the most common ones would be that I see this sort of severance. I like that show, but that's what made me think of. But this sever between the link of reward and incentive, right? Like you mentioned it before, Stephen. Like this is one of the biggest costs to companies. They want to make sure it's working for them. And how often, in your experience, certainly in my experience, was I handed a letter or handed something to say, "Hey, Matt, congrats, you've got a 2% pay increase," and I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean? Where did that even come from?" And so, or maybe I got a 10% pay increase, but I wasn't told it was for, great performance or something like that. So I think that's where the focus is shifting, is like, how can we actually make the numbers meaningful? How can we make the process really enjoyable for people and for their managers as well, right? You don't want them feeling unequipped. You don't want them feeling disempowered. They get these questions all the time. And if there's anything I remember hating when I was internally, it was always that constant, like, go and speak to HR, go and speak to the people team. Like, I think being able to empower them with information and data and just a narrative helps them be more effective at their job as well. So yeah, that's about a million things, but there's a lot going
Yeah.
on in that space that I think is just shifting the onus, right?